Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality. Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show this week. Today I'm talking with my friend, co-writer, co-producer, and worship pastor buddy, Chris Clayton. Chris is one of the top worship music producers in Nashville. His track record includes some of my favorite artists, including Shane and Shane, Big Daddy Weave, and Phillips, Craig and Dean. And his songs have been featured in LifeWay, Word, and Integrity Music. We are discussing the differences you will find as a producer starting out compared to the bar that Nashville sets for you to rise to and what it takes to hit that bar. Plus, we discuss the differences in recording a live album versus a studio album and what the role of a producer should play in an artist's life. Please enjoy my conversation with Chris Clayton. Hey guys, I am talking with my friend Chris Clayton. How's it going, sir?
Good, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's so good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a minute.
We write together. We write some worship music together. We write some sync music together. But it's been a busy year, and so we haven't seen much of each other. So it's good to get together and hang out for a little bit.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
This is absolutely. Awesome. Now, first of all, before I forget, you have a podcast.
I do
as well. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah. So it was kind of birthed out of this kind of a side hustle I have, if you will, called Song Capture. As a producer, and especially in a worship songwriter, I run along with a lot of writers, especially young writers, indie writers who are great at songwriting but don't know how to make a demo. And so that's kind of what birthed this idea of going, maybe I could help some songwriters make demos here and there. And so out of that kind of came this idea of a podcast as well called the Song Capture Podcast. And it was really, I wanted to bring in friends and new friends who actually have been a part of the podcast, writers that we all kind of know from the worship world, to kind of tell the stories behind certain worship songs that we may sing in our churches, but may not know the story of how that song came about. So to give you an example, like we had Cody Carnes on last season, and he told the story of the blessing. It was a fresh song for Cody and Carrie and the Elevation crew, and so it just hit. It was very timely when it hit with things in the world, and so we just had him on, told the story. I didn't want to lose that story, and there's been others that we've had on that just kind of tell the backstory. I think the story is just as important as the song. Yeah. So it's been a little bit of a hiatus just because of my schedule, but hopefully in the next year coming up, we'll be able to bring that back around.
And so currently, at the time of us recording this podcast, how many seasons do you have out?
2 complete seasons. Okay. We've started season 3.
Okay.
Kind of took a hiatus. We'll pick it up next year, hopefully. Yeah. That's the goal, at least.
Absolutely. Well, people listening, what's the name of the podcast, and where can you go find it?
Yeah, Song Capture Podcast, which is kind of, again, you can go to songcapture.com. Okay. There's a link there for all the other services that we have, and then it's on, all the major podcast outlets.
All the places that you like to find your podcasts.
That's right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, people go check that out. That's going to be a great podcast for people to. I love behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah,
to me,
same.
that when I watch a movie, I get a DVD. It has a movie on it or something like that, or a TV show or whatever. The behind the scenes stuff is just as important. Sometimes it's even more fun for me to watch the behind the scenes stuff.
Absolutely.
And the making of.
I love it too.
That's just a great.
I'm a credit
thing.
junkie, so I love credits.
Yeah.
I want to see who actually pull something together.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Well, so like we said, you and I have known each other for a couple of years, and we got together because I think we met on Facebook probably.
We did. Yeah.
Because we saw that each other had a podcast. We're both doing worship stuff, and so we went and had lunch and got to know each other, and I said, let's get together and write. And I was doing sync music. You were wanting to get into sync music. And so let's just try it out. And so we've written a few now. And they're making their way out there into the world. And so it's so cool to get together with people and to meet people. That's what Nashville is all about. I love that it's such a small town feel. We're all connected in a way that even though we don't know some of us may not know each other personally, it's like the friend of a friend, sort of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of a deal. And so when you do finally meet that person, you're like, oh, I know Chris Clayton. Oh, yeah. And then all of a sudden there's this connection.
Yeah.
There's a quick relationship that builds and develops because of that. A lot faster than it would under other circumstances, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
I do. I think people have this mentality. Nashville is, and it's not just Nashville, but it's the music city we're in, obviously, that it is a very cutthroat town. Yeah. And let's be honest, there's probably are pockets of that tend to be just that way. But, and I've been here 5 years now, and in the 5 years, I have sensed more community than I have anything. I've just... if I need something, I can call somebody. I needed a microphone one day. I had a vocal session. My microphone literally did not turn on that day. And I called a buddy of mine down the street and asked if I could borrow a microphone. He's like, yeah, come get whatever you want. And it was just like, he does the exact same thing I do. Like, he produces the same genre I do, but he wasn't going to withhold what he had just because. So yeah, you're right. It's a very small knit town, even though you may not know everybody.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Let's back up briefly here and tell us who you are, where you're from, and what got you into music and down this road that we'd love to be a part of.
Yeah. I was born in Texas, born and raised in Texas. I'm a native Texan, and spent some time. I'm a pastor's kid, so we traveled around a little bit. Spent some time in Oklahoma City growing up. And then I moved back to Dallas for a while in the junior high years. But when people ask, Chris, where are you from? I'll simplify that and say I grew up in a little town called Beaumont, Texas. Not really a little town. It's a thriving city. But Beaumont, Texas is down in southeast Texas, about 90 miles east of Houston. And my dad in the mid-'90s took a church down there to pastor. And so we moved there. And it's significant enough to say I'm from there because that's where I discovered my love for music. Moving there the summer of 92, and it was the first time my parents ever had MTV in the house. So I discovered MTV, and that was back when MTV actually played music videos. Right. So started getting this love for music, and I've always had a love for music. My mom plays piano. My dad played drums growing up, but my mom plays piano by ear and can just do her thing on it. So there's always been a little bit of music kind of in our blood. But moved to Beaumont, discovered MTV, discovered how cool a guitar looked on television. And I was like, I want to do that.
Right.
And that's probably a lot of kids do. And my grandparents bought me my very first guitar, and I bought a book, and I just started learning chords. I never took a lesson per se. I just started learning chords, and I think my mom's ear kind of translated into me a little bit, and just started, picking out songs, and fell in love quickly with CCM and everything that was going out here in Franklin. And there's this magical town called Franklin, Tennessee that I kept hearing about and reading about in CCM magazine and wanted to be a part of, and thought I'd never be able to go there. And now I work here every day. So it's like one of those dreams. But I started leading worship in my student ministry. And I had a very influential student pastor named Andy, and gave me my very first shot. Just taking a very young, scrappy kid who knew about 4 chords, and started just leading worship with. And that looked totally different than it does now, right? So I mean, it's like, back then worship songs weren't they were today, but it was really kind of the foreground to what I'm doing today. And then as every high school guy does, I had a band in high school, and we weren't very good, but we thought we were good. And so made a little record on a 4-track cassette recorder that my parents bought me, and that's really kind of got me in the bug of recording. So I'm moving fast because there's a lot to the story. But after high school, I moved up to Dallas and went to Dallas Baptist University, and that's where I met my wife. We've been married 20 years now, and we met there. Had full aspiration of going there just a year or a couple of years, and transferring out here to Belmont University to pursue music business. And met her literally my first or second week in my freshman year, and I was like, yeah, I think I'll stay here. I think I like this girl. I think I'm gonna stay here. And that proved to be the right move, obviously. So I finished DBU there. Started getting a lot of calls to go out and to lead worship for different events when I was in college, and was very active in my Baptist student ministry there on campus, and would lead for our weekly Bible studies. And really, just those were very formidable years between high school and college of just understanding how to lead worship. And like I said, started getting calls to go out and lead. Wasn't sure how people were getting my name, other than maybe just obviously word of mouth that I was doing that. And so graduated from there and thought, well, maybe the Nashville, the call to Nashville just wasn't what God had for me, and I was content with that. Mm-hmm. And so we got married right out of college, and shortly after, I was like, okay, I really want to pursue this idea of producing, because I really love producing. All the while I was working on, trying to read about production, didn't really have any gear, but I was like, I really want to produce music. That's what I really want to do. But at the same time, I really want to lead worship. And if there's a way for both of these to happen, then I'd love to pursue that. And came across a guy by the name of David Parker. And David's really one of my mentors that's still to this day is one of my spiritual fathers. And kind of was reached out to him, knew of David because he led worship on the road, had led at conferences that I've been part of as a student, led at different weekend events that I've been part of. So I'd known of David, but then I also started seeing his name show up on credits as a producer. And I was like, okay, he leads worship, he produces records. And so I reached out to him one day, as after we graduated. We weren't married yet, and sent him an email, and just randomly out of the blue, it was like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. If you ever have a need for like an intern or a shadow, I'd just love to come and just hang out. And as crazy as it may seem, he had just started kind of putting the word out that he was looking for somebody to help intern at his studio.
Okay.
So met with David. We hit it off, and ended up coming on as an intern for about 3 or 4 months, which was supposed to be about 6 months, but he needed me there every day because I was just learning so quickly how to do record production. And I would set up sessions, I would set up microphones, I would set up, Pro Tools sessions, and this is back in 2000. So Pro Tools was even new, like just the whole idea of just digital recording.
Yeah, that was a new world at that point.
A brand new world at that point. And David was working on some great records at the time. One of my very first records I ever got to be part of was Shane and Shane, Psalms. And
you did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I worked on that record. That was like, that thing came out.
That's one of my wife's favorite albums.
Yeah.
And one of mine too, but
right.
She loves that album.
Yeah, David produced that record, and I was, just because I worked for David, I was there every day for every session. And
okay.
Quite an amazing record to be a part of. Just the different things we did to create that record.
So the things that you said earlier, you're a credits guy, and I am as well. We love seeing and reading about who's doing what on albums and things like that. So liner credits, you made the liner credits in the Shane and Shane Psalms album.
Yeah.
So what does that feel like to get your first credit in a major label album?
Yeah.
Or a major artist album.
Well, at the time they were independent artists,
right?
But they had a massive.
But they were huge.
They had a massive following.
Yeah.
So to your credit, yes, they had a massive following. I don't think I realized at the time I didn't realize what a big deal that was. Mm-hmm. And then I think the bigger deal was when they recorded that record as an independent artist, and actually it was just Shane Bernard and Shane Everett sang it with him.
Right.
But then I think it was In Pop Records, which was a label here in town for a long while, discovered Shane and Shane, and which just rarely happens from what I understand, and I've never seen it happen actually ever again. They took the record as is that David produced and released that record as a major release.
Right.
Usually, labels want to go and redo things,
yeah.
And I know we went in and we added a couple songs to the record after they had signed. I think when it came out with the whole new artwork and as a major release, and I was seeing it in stores as just an assistant engineer and studio manager credit, that was like, oh wow, okay. I'm like 2 years into this and I've already got a major label credit. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And they actually worked at so we had a B room studio for a long time that they actually ran. So I got to hang out with them for 3 or 4 years after that. And still, we don't keep in touch, but when I've seen them over the years, they've always picked up where we left off. But
that's awesome.
So worked there at David's studio for a long time, 3 or 4 years. And then David shut the studio down because he came on staff at our church full-time as worship pastor. He had split his time between a part-time role and then the studio, and then went full-time. So basically that meant I was homeless as far as a studio was side of things. And I had a very important decision to make at that time. It was a crossroads for me, just going, okay, am I just going to give up on this, or am I going to try to just pursue it and do my own thing? And after talking with David about it and my wife about it, Kara, we were just like, well, this is time to just be an entrepreneur and just do it. And so sold a car, bought Pro Tools, bought a computer, and moved my studio home and just started making records. Now, I'd made connections over the years with different people just because of working with David and relationships, but really was just started putting myself out there, and I was like, I'm producing. Let's see what happens.
So let's talk about that for a second. When you first get into the process of creating your home studio, and you're wanting to let people know that this is what you're doing, and you're wanting to produce for other people, whether it be demos or full production, whatever, how are you putting it out there so people know who you are and can find you so that you can get the work?
Then or now, or both?
Then.
Yeah.
We'll talk about now.
Yeah.
But let's talk about then.
Yeah. I think then it was just, and I think it applies somewhat to now. It's just been kind of organically, just through relationships. Like, I've never taken out an ad in a trade magazine or put it out there. I've never advertised any of my services other than a website. And that's really more just kind of probably serves as a place for just people to find out more about me and just read. So maybe that's advertising. I don't know, but I never went and down to the clubs and was passing out my cards or anything like that. I never did that. I've never done that. I think if it's anything like my quote unquote touring career as a worship pastor, because during all this time I was traveling and leading worship a lot. For 15 years I did that forever, doing conferences and camps, and that just organically evolved just through relationships with student pastors and worship pastors. So I think for me it was just kind of just one artist would hear work that I did, and they would tell another artist about that, and then they would tell another artist. There were records that I did early on that were more beneficial for me as a producer in terms of growing my career than they were the actual artists themselves.
Sure.
So I think it's always been word of mouth and just kind of artists telling other, which is the importance of doing a great job. If you want to, serving the artist well, doing a great job, because that artist is possibly going to come back and do another record with you, but they're also going to tell their friends about it. So that's kind of how I would answer that, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to pause that conversation just for a second because something popped up when you were talking a minute ago that I think that reminded me. I was like, wait a second. I just remembered how the first time that I saw a picture of you, to know this is, and we've known each other for a couple of years now, and I'm just now having this conversation and thinking, wait, I know how I know this guy.
2 years later.
2 years later. Because you and I are both worship leaders.
Yeah.
We both have done many, many years of youth camps.
Yep.
Correct?
Okay.
And so one of the things that I do when I'm researching camps, trying to reach out, because I'm always trying to reach out to new camps I've never worked with.
Sure.
And so I'm also trying to expand, sort of my touring schedule and the routing and places I've never been before.
Yeah.
And so a few years ago, I was looking at Texas, and a couple places I've played down there. But I remember in the process of when I would go to a camp's website and I would look to see who they got scheduled to be there as a worship leader that particular year, to see if there's a slot that they can get me in, if there's any availability. And I remember seeing a picture of you leading worship, that you're going to be the worship leader for this particular camp. I don't remember which one it was. I just remember seeing a picture of you and Chris Clayton. And right now during this podcast interview, I was like, wait a second, that was you in that picture that I saw years ago on that website.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I ran a lot of Texas camps back in the day. I came off the road at the end of 2017, 2018. But our summers were crammed full of camps.
Well, what's funny about it is that because for people that are listening that happen to be worship leaders, if it's something that you want to do to lead worship at camps or conferences or whatever, the trickiest thing that I find in that whole process is trying to get in when they're actually working on booking for either that year or for the following year.
Yeah.
I tend to have it, for whatever reason, I tend to contact someone they just booked who's going to be that year. And I literally just missed it by days.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, we're not going to be doing that until October, November. And then so they say, call back, then.
Sure.
And then when I do, like, oh, we just booked somebody. It's like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding. But in the process of doing that, I would find out that it was your picture. And I thought, man, that guy keeps...
I keep getting your gigs.
No, yeah, you keep
Sorry.
getting the gigs that I'm trying to get. That was the whole thing. I was like, oh man, I just missed it. Oh, and that's Chris Clayton. That's that guy. And I would see that every now and then, and it was like I just missed it, and you were the guy who got it. And I thought, oh my gosh. And now we're like hanging out. We're buddies.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and we don't need to beat this horse to death, but maybe it's good for somebody listening. Like I found that. Yeah, you're right. Like some of these bigger camps, like associational camps, statewide camps, I mean, they book at minimum a year out, sometimes 2 years out. And I was in the same boat. I would try to want to get into these camps that were, just, bigger for whatever that means. Yeah. But I would quickly realize, they've already booked next year and next year. So like, it's just. And a lot of it was, again, I keep going back to relationships. You would have to know somebody that was kind of on the board or on the booking committee, and that was like they would bring your name into it. They wouldn't always take the cold calls, if you will. But every camp was different. It was like there were some like I remember doing. I mean, to give you an example, like one camp that I did in Texas was called Super Summer Texas, and I did it 1 year. But I tried forever to do that camp. And I say tried, I didn't like go beating down their door all the time, but that was an aspiration. Really 2 reasons. One, it was the biggest statewide camp in Texas, like from a Baptist side of things, like the associational camp, which is what I grew up in. And so it's like, I grew up going to Super Summer Texas. So it's like full circle. It would have been so like, I was thinking it would have been so like, honoring to come back to a camp that was really influential and to do what I do, at the time. And, finally got a call one day, and I was just like, okay, like we'll figure this out, whatever they need to, we'll figure out the logistics, but I'm doing this camp.
Sure.
But, it's over the years, I feel like it's gotten a lot more saturated with more and more worship leaders, obviously. So it becomes a little bit harder to get in those camps.
Yeah. And some of those camps now, they bring in like the big name artists and worship leaders and stuff. And so that you don't even get, if you're not a signed artist that's on the radio, right? Some of those camps you can't even get into,
right?
And
for me too, like I used to do a lot of Disciple Now weekends. Yeah. So like gosh, I've done hundreds of them, and I think one thing that I found was again relationships. Coming even to those smaller churches in middle of Central to West East Texas, like those youth pastors were on steering committees, if you will, for some of these bigger camps. So I would develop those relationships, not to use them, but to really, we would go year after year to these D-Nows with them, and we would develop trust with them is what I'm getting at. And so we would develop trust with them. If we can do ministry to their 50 to 100 students, then they can trust us on a bigger stage.
Sure.
To do it that way. So there is a, for lack of a better word, a little bit of a hierarchy, and kind of like, okay, go serve these churches who are out in the middle of nowhere, who don't get this kind of worship every day in terms of quality and that whatever. But develop those relationships, because it could lead to other things.
Sure.
Those youth pastors go to another church, they bring you along to their church. So again, in relationships. But anyway.
All right. Sorry, I had to
go
off
good.
on that.
I'm glad you did. That's funny. I did not know that.
Go off on that thing for just a minute. And then, okay, now we're back on track.
Story.
Sorry. Okay. Say again?
We go back to story?
Go back to the story,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where we were. After that, I started my own studio. So I moved at home, And
this is in Texas.
This is in Texas. Okay. Yeah. So this was, 2000, I don't remember, but it's been a while. Moved at home and just really started this whole idea of producing out of my home and just doing that. And because I am a worship leader, even today, a worship pastor, and even then, I would get a lot of calls for worship from worship leaders and worship bands and to produce their records, because I think people trusted me on that end of things and still trust me today that I get that idea of writing and producing songs for the church. And so I get a lot of calls for that. Fast forward to 2015, and actually before that, 2014, I started coming out here a lot to Nashville in the 2010s, I should say, mainly as a producer who was coming out here to mix records. So I developed a relationship with a guy named Sean Moffitt, who's a mix guy here in town. And Sean and I, crazy enough, we met over MySpace, if you remember MySpace out there. And Sean had moved out here in that same time frame, and we kind of developed this relationship. So I'd be producing records, and I would literally budget to fly out here and just come hang out with him for a week as he would mix a record that I was producing. And sat and just watched him and shadowed him on mixing and learned so much. Even stuff that I use today when I mix stuff, it's like I watched him do that. And so that I started coming out here frequently, probably 2 or 3 times a year for that. All the while, had gotten reconnected with an old friend of mine who I'd known for a long time, a guy named Michael Farron.
Farron.
Yeah. And if you don't know Michael's songwriter here in town, and written a lot of great songs over there. One being Let It Rain, that Michael W. Smith cut, and that kind of what got him on the map here. But Michael and I have known each other for 20 years, and he randomly reached out to me one day. I was like, hey, I've kind of been following what you've been doing as a worship leader, traveling, songwriter, producer. I'm starting my own publishing company here. Would you be interested in talking about maybe signing on as a writer? And I was like, well, I don't even know what that means. Like, I literally had no idea. Like,
he was reaching out to you to be a writer on his publishing company.
So he was starting a label.
Okay.
A little small publishing arm. It randomly reached out to me one day. Like, we were literally, I'll never forget it. We were loading out of an event. We were playing at an event in the Dallas area. It was raining. I remember that. And like my phone rang, and it was Michael. And if you know Michael, when Michael calls, you better answer, because you may not hear back from him for a while.
Oh, I know.
So I picked it up, and I was like, hey man. And we talked for a brief second, and he's like, and kind of told me that. And we ended up circling back and talking more about it. But he started this small little publishing arm, and was like, hey, I'm reaching out to a handful of people that I would trust and maybe be a part of this. And I said, well, I don't really know what all that's about, but I'm interested in learning more, because I wasn't seeking out. I was just writing songs, for my records and for other people here and there as I was producing, but I had no idea what the whole publishing world looked like. I knew a little bit about it, enough to be dangerous, but no idea what a contract or whatever was going to look like. So I said, well, actually, I'm coming out to Nashville in about a month, and maybe we can sit down and talk more about it. And he's like, great. Who are you writing with? And I said, well, I don't have any rights yet. I haven't even thought about it. He goes, dude, just get out here. I'll take care of you. I'll set up some rights, stay at my house, and we'll just hang out for a few days and just see if there's something here. So came out here, and this actually used to be Michael's studio.
That's what I was going to mention that. Yeah.
So where we're at this morning, where we're tracking this podcast, it was Michael's studio. So I walked through that door for the very first time, sat in this room, and we just, had a lot of rights in here during that week, even down in the building of my church. And I think it was like right even here that we kind of did a little handshake deal that kind of like, this is what it would look like, and so, again, naive green Chris that really didn't know what he's getting into. But about a year later, and I'm still living in Dallas, the writers that were on Michael's label, a handful of us, we all re-signed with Michael and Integrity Music. So okay. Michael had kind of partnered with Integrity on his label. And so we all re-signed deals with them. And so I wrote 3 years underneath Michael and Integrity. So I did a year and a half of that deal. I think that's about right. Still living in Dallas, in that year and a half, I was starting to make a lot of trips out to Nashville. I would come out here to write for conferences that the label was helping put on, and to be a part of those. And so I remember sitting in April of 2016, looking at my wife, Kara, and just being like, I think it's time to move to Nashville. And granted, we're 38, 4 kids at the time, and I'm thought, who says that at 38? 4 kids, like, we're going to uproot our family and move to Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do that when you're 20 and single or newly married and reckless.
Right.
It's like, and she looked back at me with tears in her eyes, and she's like, I've known we're supposed to move to Nashville for a long time, but I was waiting for the Lord to drop that in you. And of course, it was just like our whole bodies just kind of just like, we just felt this moment like the Lord was bringing us to something.
Sure.
And so I had a summer on the road, finished up the summer on the road, and we moved our family here in October of 16. Moved here with 1 record on my schedule, and that wasn't until February of 2017. But then I obviously knew I had a lot of relationships. I had a relationship with Michael. I had some with Integrity, a lot of different crew people out here. So relationships were great, which is more than some people have when they move here.
Yeah.
And had a lot of momentum in relationships, and more work was coming out here. I always say, Nashville I didn't come calling on Nashville. Nashville came calling on me, because I feel like more opportunities and more potential for work was coming out of Nashville than it was Texas at the time. Texas was kind of not drying up, but it just was like, okay, I've hit a ceiling out there that I just feel like I can't break through unless I move to a music city atmosphere that's going to challenge me, where I'm not the strongest person in the writing room anymore. And so we moved out here in 2016. I had developed a relationship with a guy by the name of Seth Mosley, who's a producer here in town, and started doing a lot of demo work for him in terms of, he would start a demo in the writing room.
Did you know Seth already?
No, I didn't. Crazy.
How did you make that connection?
The backstory there. Seth has a podcast called at the time was the Full Circle Music Show. It's since changed name to the Made It Music Podcast. But at the time, he had just launched that podcast, and I knew of Seth just through, again, credits. You just see his name and go, who's Seth Mosley? And you start doing research, and quickly fell in love with his work, and just thought he was doing great stuff, and found his podcast, started listening. And on one of his podcast episodes, he said, hey, here at Full Circle, we're always looking to expand our team. So if you produce and write or whatever, always looking to expand that. And so I hear that and I go, he's hiring. I'm moving to Nashville. I can get a job. It's problem solved. And so somehow, some way, I had Seth's personal email address. I don't know how I had that, and I still to this day don't remember how I got Seth's personal email address. So I emailed him that same day and was like, hey, my name's Chris. I write for Fair and Integrity. We have mutual friends. I'm moving to Nashville in the fall. You said this on your podcast. Love to know what that means, and just curious how we can maybe work together. And he hit me back like 30 minutes later, which I was very surprised, and said, hey, love to hear some stuff you're producing. Just, we're trying to build a team to help us do some demo production, blah, blah, blah. Send me some stuff. So sent him a reel of stuff that I'd done. He hit me back a couple of days later and was like, hey, love your stuff. Let's try track out on some stuff and see if it works. So this was right before, this is like back this is in August of 2016. So right at the end of the summer, we were planning a trip to Nashville with some friends who were moving with us here to just do like an exploratory trip and see what area we wanted to live in, look at houses and whatever. So he goes, hey, I'm going to sing you a vocal to tune, just as kind of a test run. And if you can edit and tune it, pocket it, all that stuff, that'd be great. I was like, perfect. And he said, and I need it back in 24 hours. I was like, oh crap, we're about to leave for this trip. So I brought a rig to Nashville on that trip, and I'm sitting in my car as my wife drives us to Nashville, and I'm editing that vocal on the road, on the highway. And we get to we stop in Little Rock that night. We drove halfway from Dallas, and I remember staying up like till 3 a.m, like working on this track for him. Send it to him, think I'm done. It's great. He's going to love it. I get feedback, and I get this long list of feedback from him of like things I need to do better on the vocal. Wow. Like very humbling. Yeah. Very humbling. But I love that kind of feedback. I like want to hear that stuff and like how I can get better. And so, in between our trip stops, I would literally be at home and I knocked out the vocal and like tweaked it. And, The next one, we got back from that. It ended up being fine. It was great. He loved it. He called me like 2 weeks later, which in that 2 weeks, that's the worst 2 weeks ever, because you think maybe I wasn't good enough.
Yep.
And so I haven't heard from him. And so he gives me a text or a call or whatever, and it's like, hey, I got another track. I'd love for you to do some key stuff on it and edit the vocal and just kind of clean up the demo that I started. Because Seth would start these demos in the writing room. Okay. And he would send me the session, and I would finish it out for him. And I was like, okay, should I ask him, is this a paid thing, or is this still like, are we still trying out?
Sure.
And so I just asked him, I was like, hey, I'm good either way, but I just kind of want to know the expectation. Am I good? Is this a for hire thing? And he's like, oh yeah, we're good. This is totally a paid thing. So like at that point kind of became on his demo staff, if you will.
Okay.
So I did that literally. We moved here in the fall, and I literally, if it wasn't for Seth, and I've told him this, I said, if it wasn't for Seth, our first year, we would have tanked financially, because there wasn't enough momentum rolling on other things yet. So I worked on demos for a lot of artists here in town that he was writing with, and some that made the record and some that I actually got production credit for, nice. Additional production credit for. So, but that, honestly, Marty, that was like higher education of production for me for a year, because again, I would get that feedback. I was working on great songs, great tracks, and there was a bar. I was learning the Nashville Bar of production. I thought I had a bar of what that looked like in Texas. Okay. I was learning that new bar.
So what's the difference between the bar in Texas and the bar in Nashville?
Yeah, well, I would say for me, I could break it down probably a little bit to a few things. One, I'll go back to vocal production. Learning how to properly track and edit and pocket and tune a vocal was probably the biggest thing I learned from him. The expectation of that bar. Because I would go in, what I thought was tuned and tight and a pop, ready vocal wasn't what his expectation was. Now, that varies probably from producer to producer. But this is a guy, Seth, who's at the top of his game, right then. Mm-hmm. And so I would quickly learning. He would get very detailed in his feedback of the notes, of terms of like, hey, this syllable, this note is a half step flat. I mean, he could just hear it, and he would just say, it's half step flat. You need to tune that up. So my ear got retrained to be able to hear the things that he was hearing when it came to vocal stuff like that. Another example would be just tight timing, learning that everything, whether you like it or not, modern music is so driven by a grid. Yep. And learning how to pocket that stuff so that it is so tight that there is no discrepancy in that. But also, I think the bar of just the big picture of production, of learning how to layer things and how to introduce new things into the picture, and how certain sounds create certain emotions. And looking at it from that side of things was a new bar. So there's a lot that play into that, but there's probably a technical bar, and there's actually probably a musical bar as well.
Well, when you were doing the demo work with him, are you doing mostly full production demo work, or is that kind of like the guitar vocal, piano vocal, or are you kind of doing both of those things depending on the artist?
Depending. A lot of it was, so Seth has this mentality that he doesn't produce demos, he produces masters. Yeah. And so and I learned something from him in this that I still use today, that I try to at least. He would produce a demo full tilt, like, I mean, man, he would be like, hey, I want to put real drums on this demo, so like hire out a real drummer and send it to this one, or I want these kind of guitars on it, so if you can't take it, make sure you send it out to somebody. And his whole intention, at least what I perceived his intention, was produce a really slamming demo so that the label hears it and goes, hey, why don't you just do the master? So he would actually get hired on to actually produce the record. And then he would go back and literally take the demos that we started and then just probably recut the vocal, because they would probably spend 20 minutes on a vocal in a writing session just to get a vocal down. Right. But he would go back and recut the vocal. We would go in, and he would probably go in and re-clean up some stuff. But he would keep a lot of the elements of the demos, which is how I got some production credit. Okay. Because he would keep a lot of the stuff that I would do. So either I'd get production credit or I'd get a player credit type thing. So, but I learned that that's a brilliant way to just develop the trust of the artist,
Sure.
because you're helping create the sound of that song.
Yeah.
And then whether it's the artist or whether it's the label or whether it's management, hear that and go, man, we really love what he did on the demo. Why don't we just have him finish out the master?
Yeah.
So now you're moving into an income generating stream versus just like, I'm just going to do a demo because I'm a writer on the song. So, yeah, I think that's one thing I learned from him as far as another bar of like being a producer in Nashville, is you're trying to develop trust with the artist on that side of things.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And things that the audience really needs to know, that these are ways to make, to give yourself an opportunity that you would never think about necessarily, unless we're having this conversation to say, okay, this is how you need to do it.
Yeah.
And I've found that once I started doing sync music, and we've done this together, is that when you're writing music for sync, you don't have time to create a demo.
Right.
You can't send a demo in.
Right.
They don't even take
want
them,
that. Yeah.
Right. They want a finished product. And usually you've got 24 to 48 hours to create an entire song out of thin air.
Yep.
Fully produced, sent in. That's got to be good enough that can go on a TV show or a movie or whatever.
Yeah.
So we sort of work in that same vein already anyway.
Yeah.
Which makes things move a lot faster. And if you can create something and produce something and lay it out there that is radio ready the first time out. And I've noticed this. I've had this conversation with other people, other producers, that a lot of times the demo sounds better than the master that goes on the album and ends up on radio or on CD.
Yeah, it can.
Many, many times I've had that conversation, and people they're like, yeah, the radio single's okay, but the demo was way better.
Yeah.
you know, of course we'll never hear what the demo sounded like, but it's out there,
Sure.
So
yeah.
Let's talk about it now. So we're currently, this is where Michael Farron's studio used to be.
Yeah.
And I wrote with Michael here a few years ago.
Yeah.
First time we got together. And now he's moved on. He's over at, I think he's at Word.
He's at Word, yeah.
Publishing now, writing for them. And so now this is your studio. First of all, how fun is that you get to take Michael's old studio and now make it yours?
Yeah.
And I love this space. This is such a cool place.
Thank you.
But now as a producer, like, this is what you do full time.
It is.
This is what you get to do. And as a you're also a worship pastor at the church next door here. But as far as, producing, you're all over the place. I mean, you do a lot of traveling. I know you go back to Texas and do a lot of live recordings with different churches and things like that. Let's talk about what that kind of world looks like for you a little bit.
Yeah. To what you were talking about, I kind of wear two hats in terms of the producer world. I mean, producing, songwriting is definitely full-time and more, just throughout the week. And then shortly after we moved here, I came on staff here at Gateway Church in Franklin as a worship pastor, and was on staff. Come up on 5 years here, and it's a juggling match throughout the week sometimes to be able to wear both hats, especially as the church grows, as production world grows for me. But threaded throughout every week is just this thread of grace that will allow me to do both. I have a great team here that helps with production and stuff like that. So I'm blessed to have that. But my pastor just is very supportive of what I do down here in the studio, and so it's kind of evolved into this world of production. Moving here, this is our 5th year here, and Lord's just opened up a lot of doors, a lot more relationships. A lot of different artists have come through these doors in the last 5 years to be a part of. But especially in the last couple of years, even through the craziness of 2020, like, started doing traveling, which I thought I was coming off the road, but I kind of jumped back on it a little bit, not to the extent that I was, and I probably will never be that extent, but I've been working with a lot of artists who I'll work on a track here, and I may fly out to where they are to capture the vocal and work with them there. Or like this church in Texas, I've been working a lot with this church, Valley Creek Church in Texas, on a live record, a Christmas EP that we just released, and I'll go out there and work with them for a week and a half at a time, just on their music, then bringing it back here to Franklin and working on it here. So there's a lot of file swapping, a lot of plane rides to work on things like that. But especially in the live music world, it's a very involved process of doing live records.
What's the difference in recording a live record versus a studio?
Yeah.
record for how you do it?
I think the mentality of that people perceive that a live records actually is easier, and because it's easier, it should be cheaper. And and when really it's actually the opposite. It's actually a lot more work than a studio record.
In what way?
Well, yeah, I think process wise, at least my process, and I think every producer probably has their process, but you end up recording the record almost 3 times in a live record scene.
Okay.
One being the first being in pre-production. So to give you just context, so when I sat down with Valley Creek and we started working on the record for this year, like we've been writing for this record since November of last year. So songs just floating around email boxes and drop boxes and Trello boards and whatever, just listening to songs, writing songs, a lot of writing sessions. But then once we picked the final songs for the record, then I spent a good month probably just building out pre-production tracks. So building out demos for them to learn the songs, writing parts, working with their team, sending them stems to be able to write their parts, like send them to their guitar players to write their parts, coaching, editing, producing those parts, and then printing out final stems for them to play to in a live scenario at the night of the recording. So right there, we've already recorded full demos of the 8 songs that we've done that's going on the record. Well, then we record the live night, and so we capture that night. So then we recorded the second time, and then we're going into the post-production process, which is what we're wrapping up right now, and that's going in and seeing what we want to keep, which I love, try to keep as much as we can, and then what we need to replace or what we need to augment. 9 times out of 10 for me, I'm going to replace electric guitars because I like to get better tone, better timing, just focus on parts. But not always the case. Some of the stuff we keep. This time around, which I was really grateful for, we actually were able to keep, we replaced some of the main vocals, but we actually kept some of the kind of spontaneous flow moment vocals, and as they would go off and kind of lead, maybe write another section in the spontaneous section or whatever. It's hard to recapture that moment from in the studio on the post production side. So they sang it really, really well, and I was able to go in and just do some editing, some tuning, and keep those moments.
When you're recording a live album, because you're in this live space, you're in a big auditorium, you got live speakers going, if you got an audience, all that kind of stuff. And you're tracking all that live. And then you go in post-production and you have to replace parts. Do you have to replace it in the studio, or do you go back and do you, like in the same space that you recorded live, have them re-record in that same space to pick up the same tones?
No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, we just do it in the studio.
Okay, so then how do you recreate the sound of a live venue in the studio? I know it happens, but I want to pull out for our listeners what that process is like, and how do you recapture the same sound and tones that you do in studio that you do live?
Right. So probably a couple of things I can say on that. One, like from a vocal standpoint, I'm not using the same microphone they used the night of. Obviously, I'm using that mic back there, Neumann mic, and if we were just keeping, if I wasn't keeping any of the actual live vocals, it would be easy because no one's ever going to know the live tone from the night of because they never heard it. In this case, we're actually keeping some of the actual live vocals. It's a lot of EQing and processing to get them to sound very matched. I've got it to a place on my session that I feel like it's matched, but then I'm going to really lean into our mix guy who's mixing it to be like, and I'm hiring a guy who does a lot of live record mixing. So he already knows this world. He's not, he knows how to be able to create this moment of making it feel like it was in the room already. Okay. So it's important to get someone who actually is seasoned and experienced in that kind of genre, in that kind of live recording atmosphere. So a lot of it for me is like, well, one, it's the performance. Actually, I want to make sure that I'm not. This is going to sound weird, but I don't want to overproduce the overdubbed vocal so that it sounds so. I want it to be clean. I want it to be timed. I want it to be in tune, but I want it to feel like it's a live vocal, even on the performance side. So, like, even if it's just a little bit out of time, or if it's just a little bit squirrely sounding, like it's not. I want it to feel like it's a live vocal. I'm going to match it with a reverb that's going to sound maybe close to the room as well. So it's a lot of processing to just make it feel natural. The other caveat to the thing is performance wise, like with a lot of live records are doing, but especially with the Valley Creek record, they actually videoed it, like they actually filmed it.
Right.
And so we're having to be really mindful of making sure that the recut vocals are matching up timing wise to the original vocals, so that when they come back to them on a video side of things, that they're synced. There's no way we can get it all perfect, and that's the beauty of film editing. They can cut away if a word is not held as long, and that's something we have to do in post-production. Like once we get the videos back, I'll sit with the team and we'll watch for those things, like, oh, you know what, that word didn't match up, and we can't fix it now, but video editor can make an edit, and no one's ever going to know the difference on that. So I think it's just magic of EQ and compression and effects that can help kind of tie it all together.
It's such an interesting concept to do all that.
Yeah.
And
that's why I say it's so much more work than what people realize it is.
Yeah. And this is going to sound weird. This may sound, I love live albums.
Yeah.
I love the feel of it and, the people in the room. And in some ways, it's almost like, what's the point of doing one if you have to go back and recut all this stuff and redo? Sure. Like, why even do it if half of it's going to end up being a studio album, technically, quote unquote? Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm just curious. Like,
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are this: I can't produce a moment from the crowd in the studio that I can live.
Okay.
I'm not recutting the moments. And you'd have to hear. I mean, as you listen, even as you've heard live records, sure. Live worship records. But
yeah, I've been a part of them.
And that's what I encourage. Like the Valley Creek team, I keep bringing them up because it's the one I'm working on right now. But like, I'm not here to capture your performance. I'm here to capture the moment that the Holy Spirit does in that time. The emotions and the rawness of hearing the crowd worship is something I can't reproduce in a studio.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm more interested in capturing. I'm interested in capturing those moments after the song where the Holy Spirit's doing something really special and unique in the room. And the team is sensitive enough to flow with that and to keep pressing into that song. That's why I wanted to leave those, like everything in that moment alone.
Yeah.
Because I if I try to reproduce that live in the studio,
you're gonna lose it.
I lost it. I sucked all the emotion out of it. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of camps out there who do live records and do very minimal overdubs, and I think that's where you get to level of musicianship. Where you really spend time in rehearsals to get great tones, to get great tracking, to get great vocal parts, and the level of a singer who can sing well enough to not have to worry about trying to go back later and recut it. Sure. I think if I sat with this session that I'm working, these sessions that I worked right now, on the majority of them, I could probably edit and tune and pocket the live vocal enough to keep it. But by the time I do all that, I can also recut it and just get it really where I want it to be from a performance side. I hear what you're saying, and it's always the question people ask, like, why it's not a live record anymore.
Yeah.
But again, I go back to the emotions of the moment, especially in a worship world.
Sure, and that makes total sense. Yeah. I understand the blending of the two worlds to do that. So, and people have been doing it. I mean, even since the early '90s.
Sure.
I remember when Stephen Curtis Chapman put out the Live Adventure.
Got it.
Like the Great Adventure album, then the Live Adventure was
Yep.
a live concert recording, whatever. And it won a Dove Award for, live video, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then years later, he's talking, I think it's actually in his book, his
Heaven and the Real World book.
Yep.
Yep.
Between Heaven and the Real World.
Yep.
And he's talking about that video, and he was sick when he was recording, when they recorded that live album.
I remember this. Yep. I've read the book.
And so he had to go back and re-record his vocal after the fact and try to match up what they were doing, and that he would go outside and he would run up and down the street to wear himself out like he had been, like he would have to do on stage.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never knew that.
Yeah, yeah.
And yet, so they overdubbed, and it's not really live vocals to some degree at least.
Right. But listening, you would never know.
Listening, you never know, ended up winning a Dove Award.
Right.
I was like,
and I think
wait, you're cheating.
Yeah, I think that goes back, obviously, I don't apologize for the process that I do. I think that's part of it. I think it's a very accepted process.
Absolutely.
But I think it shows the importance of getting the right personnel on a project like that so they can pull that.
They can do it.
That
sure.
you can do it. Everything from a producer to an engine to a mix guy, to be able to pull it all together at the end. Mix is so crucial on a live record. We actually we've talked about it. We just decided on a mix guy a week ago. And we've talked about several different guys. Who do we want to mix this? Who's pulling it together the best? And it's so important. It's the mix can make or break a live record, in my opinion.
Sure, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about just the room here. I'm looking around the studio, and I see there's this whiteboard behind you that's got all kinds of X's and check marks and all kinds of things. Talk about the process of recording, whether it's the live album or a single or a studio album, whatever it is. Like this board behind you, I'm looking at, that's the Valley Creek Live album, and you got check marks and X's and things. Like what is that for? How do you kind of break down the process of going through what that is on the board there?
Yeah, the board is something that I actually implemented this year. I've had it for a while, but it took this form. I know y'all can't see it, but this form of check boxes and marks. And it's something I didn't really invent. You see these in studios a lot sometimes, but at any given time, especially in the last, especially this past year, I may have had, I think, 15 songs on the board at one time. Okay. So I can't keep up with all that in my head. So I started putting this board in place just to have a visual reminder of what's done and what needs to be done. So I usually look at that board at the end of every day and kind of walk through it and go, okay, this is what I need to do tomorrow. Okay. And so I'll look at it and go, okay, well, I need to cut acoustics on 2 songs. So I'm going to carve out some time to cut acoustics on this. And then I have another record I need to cut acoustics on or whatever. So I'll cut it. Well, I have the mic up. I can just knock that out. And so I will say there's nothing more satisfying than put an X on the board because you feel like you're actually accomplishing something that day.
Yeah.
So it's also very beneficial to me as a producer going, I actually got something done today.
Sure.
Towards a record.
Because otherwise it's a never-ending process.
It's a never-ending process.
If you don't have something to check off by.
Yeah. So, process-wise, again, we'll do a single. Usually with singles these days, it's more cost-effective for me to just send files to players within town to actually play on the record than for me to go hire out a studio because they can't see it, but this is not. I can't cut drums in this room. This is more of like an overdub type suite. I can do everything but drums in here pretty much. Yep. But I'll go if on days I need to cut, that I would need to cut drums with a live drummer. We'll run down to any number of studios that we have in Nashville and rent out their space for a day. But for a single, it's not cost effective in my opinion to do that when I can go pay a drummer anywhere from, $150 to $250 a song and knock that out, or I would pay anywhere from $350 to $700 a day for a studio on top of the drummer's fee.
Correct.
So, for singles, usually what I will do is I'll build out pre-production. Pre-production is such a crucial part of what I do, like sitting down with the artist, getting kind of a work tape or a rough demo of the song, listening to the arrangement, giving some feedback. Again, producing is more than just hitting the red button. It's actually working with the artist to make sure the song is the best it can be. And that can be a very dangerous, well, it cannot be dangerous. It can just be you have to kind of tread lightly depending on the artist. Because some people hold their song so tightly to their chest, they don't want ever, to touch them. But I found the artists that really want to grow and that succeed have very open hands to their songs because they want a producer who actually will speak into their music as in a whole and not just capture it on a hard drive. So we'll listen to the song, we'll work out the arrangement, adjust anything that we both feel like it needs to be adjusted lyrically, chord wise, and then I'll sit in here in this room and just kind of start building out a track. And it's just basically I just call it getting on a grid, like just figuring out BPM, laying down a basic scratch piano, maybe some pads, maybe some basic programming, and then either have the artist come in if they live here in town, or if they have the capability of recording a scratch vocal where they're at, just send me a scratch vocal, and then that comes in. And then from there, I'm sending it out. Like I'll usually send it out to a drummer and get drums on it. Every stage, I like to send a rough mix to the artist. So like once we get drums back, I'll send a rough mix to the artist going, hey, this is what drums did. How you feeling? Like makes them feel like they're a part of the process.
Yeah.
but I also don't want any surprises come back after I'm 3 layers into this thing going, hey, I don't like this. And I have to go back and undo it, which is just going to cost more time, more money, all that. So yeah, bass, electrics, a lot of farming out just to players. They'll send back files. And I mean, that's become a very normal thing to do, and very accepted. And I think if you get great players with great setups at home, I mean, some of the best drum sounds I've ever heard have come out of a guy's bedroom.
Yep.
And they're just insane.
Sure.
Yeah. Same with guitar. I mean, just like they're just sitting there with their amps in a closet and mic'd up and playing through an Apollo Twin interface, and it sounds amazing. Like so, and then from there, it's again, it's either if they want to come to town, they can come to town and do a vocal. If they live here, they can do the vocal. But because of technology, because I can fit everything into a little backpack and a road case, I can fly and carry everything. I mean, I've literally flown to Minnesota 3 times this year to do 3 singles with this artist up there. And I literally stay there. It takes me more time in driving and traveling than it does for me to track the vocal. So I literally will hop on a plane the night before with my gear, mic, interface, show up to their place. We record the vocal, and I leave and I head back to the airport. And I'm back on a plane and I head home. And I'm 24 hours, 30 hours. And so that's become more and more viable and actually become kind of a selling point, if you will, to what I do. Because like if she's a mom of 3 kids, she may not be able to get away to come and track a vocal, but I can run out there for a quick trip and, build that into her budget and track a vocal. And then we go to mix and use a variety of mixing guys. Sometimes I mix it. I try not to mix anything that I produce. I just think it's good to have another set of ears on it. I think that's always to me, it's proven to be beneficial on songs that I'm producing, not to mix it. That may not always be the case depending on the budget, but usually, especially in the last few years, that's been the case. And then to another guy for mastering, a couple of different guys I use for mastering. That's kind of a basic process.
Okay. Why, just out of curiosity, yes, you can send out sessions to different players. Do you do that because you have a certain guitar player, certain bass player piano player, whatever, that you love, you love their sound, their tone, whatever, you want them to be a part of it, as opposed to, because you're a great guitar player. We've done a lot of stuff together, and so I know that you're a great player. So what's the purpose of sending it out to someone else as opposed to just you doing it yourself? You're pre-production on everything else. You're laying out pads and pianos, whatever. Right. And if you know you can play the part, why not you play the part instead of having to wait on? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. Yeah, I can play guitar. I have a lot of guitars in here, but I'm not the best, and I want the best.
Okay.
It's worth it for me to have the best for the artist that I'm producing, and I'm speaking into parts, like literally, like in pre-production. So we'll go back to drums for a minute. On pre-production, I'm literally building out the drum part.
Yeah, like you're telling the drummer what you want him to play.
A very loose map, if you will, like a vibe. I'm giving him a vibe. Like I use a guy named Jacob in town a lot, and I'll tell Jacob, hey, I produce. Here's my vision of the drums. You do you. Like this is kind of where I would love for it to sit, idea wise. But if you feel a different kick pattern, totally open to it. And there's been times when he's literally just reproduced what I've given him because he loved it so much.
Yeah.
And I actually asked him recently. I was like, "Hey man, am I putting you in a box too much when I do this?" He goes, "No, I wish actually more producers would do that because you're actually producing me without being in the room.
Right.
You're giving me a roadmap." And he'll change up. And I challenge him. I was like, "Please change up the fills, like because I'll just copy and paste sometimes the fills just because it's just pre-production." But like he'll go in and change that up, or he may add something, little spice to it. But for the most part, he's simply just follow my map of what I give him. From a guitar side of things, I'm a producer guitar player. I'm not a session guitar player. And that's, for me, it's like there's guys that can get way better tone. And plus, again, it's like the guys that I hire to play on stuff are producers as well. So they're going to think parts. They're going to think differently than I think. And they swim in, while I swim in the big picture world of production 24/7 practically, they swim in guitar world 24/7. So that's all they sleep. That's all they breathe and sleep. So, I think, there are a lot of guys who do everything, and kudos to them. And I do a lot. Like I do all the programming usually, but sometimes I'll do a lot of programming, and then I'll send it to another guy and be like, "Hey, fill in any holes you hear. Like, just give me something. If there's anything you hear differently from a key standpoint, give it to me. And then I'll kind of just pick and choose and see what works best. And, 9 times out of 10, I'm cutting the acoustics on the record. So I'm working a lot, but I'm working a lot on sending emails back and forth with players going, hey, I love this vibe. I don't love this vibe. Mm-hmm. And everybody that I work with player-wise is always like open-handed to going, okay, let's change it. Let's go back and recut something, So, but then a lot of it's just like, man, what they turn in is just gold, and
Sure.
I just roll with it. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can we talk about what a budget looks like? When someone wants to have you come and produce we'll just take a single, for instance, because we live in a singles world currently.
Yeah.
Most everything put out now is just, you put out a single, you put out a single, you put out a single. Eventually that may turn into an EP or an album if you do enough within a year, whatever it is. But what, in general, not necessarily you specifically, it's not necessarily our business, but what would you say is a general budget that an artist would pay to have a single produced currently nowadays? Yeah.
Well, that's going to run a lot on a few things. Some guys are the all-in-one guy, and they can afford to do a little bit cheaper than some guys who bring in outside players. I think experience level is going to play a lot into that. A guy that's been doing it 20 years is not going to be charged what a guy that's been doing it 2 years. The 2-year guy may think he should charge 20 years.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean he or she deserves what that, because of experience.
So what do you think someone who's been doing it for a couple of years?
Yeah.
Who's got a couple of years of experience doing it and can do a good job, like what would you say that price should roughly be? What would you think?
At some point, like, there's still a little bit of going, hey, and I think it's so situational. Like a single college kid versus a married person who's got bills to pay is going to be a little bit different on that too. So there's always that, at 2 years into it, if you're still learning your stuff, like maybe you should just talk with the artist and say, hey, what do you have to offer? What could you pay me for this? A couple $100, $400, $300. Like you're still learning, but are you to the point where you feel confident enough that you can charge somebody to do that and take that on and turn around a $400 product, a $300 product? Like, where are you at on that? Versus someone who's 20 years into it who may charge you $5,000 a track. Well, they've been doing it for 20 years, so they can charge $5,000 a track because they also have the track record of working with a certain level artists, a certain level. Maybe they have accolades to back that up, awards or singles or whatever. So I think I've always seen that's how that's driven, is like, it's very driven on experience and accomplishments. So, when someone wins an award, I think people will go, well, we can ask more now because they've proven themselves. So I think a 2-year person, could teeter from the idea of going, hey, I'm open to talking about whatever you can afford, which I know guys that do that. They're like, hey, I'm brand new to town and I have, very little experience. I'm just trying to find artists that I can work with just so I can grow my craft. And then there's guys that have been doing this forever. They're going to charge $5,000-$6,000 a track. And then there's everybody in between. So I think as an artist, it's important to find, it's important to find someone that you just connect with personality wise and who sees the vision of your music, and then talk finances. Because I've had a lot of talks with people about finances of record budgets, and then we realize we're maybe not the best people to work together. Not because we don't like each other, but my vision, my strengths and my vision of how I work may not work well with where they want to go. So it's hard to put a number on it because everybody does it differently. I think most people do it by the song. So I will say that most producers I know will charge by the song, and that's very all inclusive to whether they're bringing in players, whether they're bringing in an outside mix guy, mastering guy, and it takes the pressure off the artist to think, I don't have to pay this guy hourly. Does that make sense? So
it's just, here it is. This is one lump sum for the song,
and it's up to the producer to manage that.
And then you as a producer have to take that lump sum, and you have to pay extra players out of that. You have to pay the mixing guy, you have to pay the mastering guy, and then whatever's left over is what you get.
Yeah, which is typically how labels work too. Like they're going to give the producer a big recording budget, big is relative, but they're going to give them a recording budget to go produce their artist, and that's going to include a lot. Basically, it's a producer's job to manage that budget to make that record happen and turn it in by the date that they've been given by the label. So that's how a lot of producers work here in town. That's how I've worked for, forever. I was on a per song budget, and that's increased over the years because I've done more. It's increased because the economy's asked for me to increase it. More kids, more money. So yeah, I think, but I also think the higher level of tracks that a producer is turning in, and it's going to attract bigger artists per se, better artists, however you want to phrase that. You start building trust in the community, and you're turning out great work, and it's doing something in the music community. Then that kind of gives you some freedom, if you will, maybe to change your rates.
Okay,
it's a big question to answer.
That's great information, and it is. I mean, everybody's different, but it's just trying to figure out so people listening that are artists thinking, okay, I need Chris Clayton, I need Marty Keith, I need Seth Mosley, whoever. I want that person to record my song or my album, and like you said, it's all over the map. You go online, you look up how much does it cost to record a song or for a producer or whatever, and everyone's different. I'm just trying to see if there's, get opinions from different producers on kind of what they feel an average rate might be for those types of things. So just so that people listening have an idea, like, okay, I know what to expect.
Yeah, I'll throw a range. I think a producer. This is not without me doing any research, but from just conversations I've had over the years. A producer who's full time at what they do in this world, in a CCM. Let's just put it the CCM worship market. I would suspect it's going to range anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a song.
Okay,
that's what I'm going to guess. People who are like producing out amazing work that's either top tier independent artists or is also swimming in the label world. You're gonna look in that window probably. When you look at a producer who's very busy, they're going to be charging more because their demand is higher. Mm-hmm. Someone who's not very busy is probably not going to charge as much because there's no need for them to charge. They need to attract clients into their work. Yeah. So someone who's going to be doing a lot of work, you should expect to pay more because they're in demand. And they also may not be able to get to you right away because their calendar's full. So a lot of producers are like, I'm available and I'm this amount, but I can't even get to you until January. That's not them being egotistical. That's just the realistic schedule. So I think that's probably a fair number. There probably may be people that listen and go, nah, that's not fair, or that's not accurate. But from what I gathered.
Yeah. And you've got your ear to the ground on what that is. Cause you work with so many, so many producers.
And there's guys in town that are more than that per song.
But and there's going to be some that'll be less.
But they're also, and there's a lot that are less, and there's the ones that are more have probably opted. I know guys who just do label work because they can stay busy enough with label artists, and so they don't. And I know some guys that have a label rate and an artist in an indie rate.
Right.
I know mix guys have that. Mastering guys have that. So again, that's why there's so many variables to how this could play out. I always tell people there's so many different ways that we could work a budget because there's so many, there's a lot of variables to a budget that can be increased monetarily or decreased monetarily depending on what you have. For me as a producer, if there's an artist that comes in that I hear their songs and I'm like, man, I really love what he or she is doing. Like, this is awesome. I obviously can't do it for nothing, but are very, very discounted. But if they said, hey, I have a certain amount of money to work with, and I'll figure a way. Well, I can't do 4 songs, but I can do 2 songs, and I've done that all the time. I'm like, I love what you're doing. I love the songs you're doing. I think there's a lot of potential of what you're doing here, and I know you'd love to do 4 songs, but I can't do it. I can't do 4 songs for the money you've given. But I'd love to be involved with what you're doing because I believe in you. But maybe we start with 2. Let's see how the relationship goes. Let's see what you can do with these 2 songs. And that's been more beneficial, honestly, for both parties than anything I've ever done. Yeah. So true producers are always looking out for talent that they want to invest in and not just want to take their money from. And that's kind of where I've been in the last few years. Like I want to surround myself with artists that I feel like I just connect with, I don't feel like I'm just hitting the red button. I'm actually pouring into them more than just, well, especially as a worship leader, like working with a lot of young worship pastors and leaders, and like how I can help develop and mentor them outside of the red button. So
what do you think is the hardest part of producing an artist? You know, they're an okay songwriter as opposed to a great songwriter, but you're willing to do it anyway. Is it egos? Is it, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So probably a couple answers. Practically, songwriting is probably can be the hardest part, because if you don't have good songs, there's nothing I can do to make it great. I mean, I can make
it can sound amazing. Recordings sound amazing, but the song
may not move you. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's terms for this. So when an artist comes to me, before we ever talk anything, I'm just like, let's hear. I want to hear some songs. Like, send me a Dropbox of songs. I don't care if it's your iPhone work tapes. Like, I just want to hear. I want to hear how you sing, because especially if it's artists I've never worked with. Like, you know, I can go probably find them, but if they're new, I'm like, I don't know who they are. I'm like, can you actually sing? But I also want to hear your songs. Like, let's if you want to record 5 songs, well, send me 10. Like, let's write. Like, you need to write a bunch of songs to get to the 5 that you want to get to. So send me what you have, and I'll give them some feedback. At least my initial thought. This happened yesterday. I got a guy that wants me to do a single, and he sent me a song, and it's a great song. But we're meeting on Friday, because he's open-handed. Like, hey, if there's anything you suggest, maybe we could talk about tweaking some stuff. Well, I have a couple suggestions. It's in a great place, but I want to sit down with him and go, hey, this was my initial reaction on some of the stuff. And so I'd be remiss as your producer not to say this. So yeah, songwriting is huge, to the point where if songs aren't there, I'll encourage them, go, hey, why don't we spend some time actually working on some songs together? That way I get excited about what I'm working on with you from a production standpoint. So we'll sit down and we'll actually write together. There's been artists that have come in with songs, a couple songs, and I go, hey, you know, you're wanting to do 5 songs, you only have 2. Can we spend a good 2 or 3 months just me setting up some writes, and we write together? And these are artists that come that I like, okay, I really want to be a part of what they're doing. And so I produced a girl named Sky Reedy last year, and Sky and Blaine and her husband and I literally pulled in different writers here in town to write for her project. And Sky's super talented, a great worship leader. And I pulled in different people to write for her record. And the songs that she brought to the table weren't the songs that we ended up recording, because she fell in love more with the songs that we actually wrote for the project once I was involved. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with me being involved. It's like, but I wanted to bring in my community of writers that I knew about that would resonate well with her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does have to do with you being involved.
Well,
because otherwise those things wouldn't have happened. You know, I understand what you're saying.
Sure, I get it.
But let's give credit where credit's due. You know, because that is the role of a producer.
Sure, it is.
That is part of your job.
It is
to pull out the best that you can in an artist, right?
Yeah, and I think that's misunderstood today. Like, I think people's view of producer is the guy that just sits down and with a mouse on a keyboard and makes tracks, and that's obviously part of it. But the long-lasting producers are the ones that pour into the artist from the very beginning and see potential and want to see and help write the song and help craft the songs, and who are living with these artists to help make sure they launch a career that's just successful, if you will.
Yeah, because at least back in the day, and this is still true to some point, depending on who you're working with, who the producer is, whatever. But, you know, in the old days, the producer wasn't the guy hitting the button. You had a recording engineer that would hit stop and start and record and whatever, right? And then the producer was the guy who was sitting in the room giving direction. Yeah. Telling you, okay, you should do this, or let's change this, or what, hey, the player do this, that kind of thing. But you weren't doing that and hitting the button back in the day. Now we live in a world where, you know, we have to multitask, and we kind of do all of these parts together at the same time.
And I honestly kind of wish we'd get back to that a little bit, because
it's just more money, though.
That's kind of what I was getting at. Like, we don't have the budgets to do that anymore. But there's been times where like I had an intern for a couple of years here, and he would literally just engineer some stuff for me, and like he actually went to a drum session with me one time, and I just got to just kind of hang out in the room and be more engaged on the production side of things, because I wasn't worried about, is my signal coming in too hot? Do I, how's that kick drum sound? All important stuff, but your brain gets split sometimes from the technical and production side of things. But you reminded me, I don't know if you've seen this on Disney Plus, this Beatles documentary that's come out called Get Up, Get Back. And it's a documentary they just released on the 2 weeks of writing and rehearsals of the Beatles getting ready to record. I think it's the Let It Be album on the rooftop. And they're all just literally circled up in this circle, and all four of the Beatles, and just working out the parts. But in the back, kind of to the left, is George Martin, who's their producer. And he's just kind of just hovering and listening. And every now and then he'll walk over there and give a little input, and he'll kind of walk away. So he's actually producing before they're ever in the studio. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. As a producer, is before we ever bring the players together, before we ever get in the red, it's like a true producer is someone who's investing in the artist from the song side of things. So that's probably one challenge. I think another challenge is, I've always joked that I think every producer should have a psychology degree because you're dealing with people constantly of all different temperaments, all different backgrounds, all different moods. How do you produce a vocal from someone who's just walked through a very hard season of life, but they're singing a song about God's faithfulness? Like, how is a producer supposed to do that? I can get very mechanical and very robotic, and be more worried about pitch and timing and tone, and those are all important. But I'm not going to get any of those if I don't know how to talk to a person, to get to them, to get to the meat, like get out of their head and get to the heart. Farron used to say all the time, and it's something I even use today, is like, put a picture on it. Like, for especially worship leaders, like, picture that person that sits on the third row of your church every Sunday. You're leading to that person, even though you're standing in a studio today behind a microphone. Like, how would you lead that person? So it's like, that's always a challenge for me, because one artist is not the same as the other artist from week to week. Yeah. So it's like having to learn how to deal with that's not the right way to say it, but how to just navigate different personalities and temperaments and upbringings and church hurt, all that. It's just, it all comes into play when you deal with so many people.
No, that's great. That's great, man. I appreciate all that. That's really good stuff for all of us to hear. We could sit and talk for hours on this stuff. This is fun. I love doing this and hanging out with you, but I know you've got records to produce and things to do. So we'll wrap it up. But as we do, just like we do always, what's some advice that you would give either, an artist that are wanting to hire a producer? Like, what would you say to them if, they came to you? Like, what would be some of that advice that you would give? Or for people that are getting into being producers and recording engineers and these types of things that you've been a part of, like, what is it that they need to know?
Yeah.
From Chris Clayton.
I'll hit both sides of the coin there. I think for artists, I think, and this is going to be, you're going to go, well, this is easier for you to say, Chris, because you are a producer. I think the biggest investment you could do for your music is to bring in a producer who actually can help create your sound. Very few artists out there do a great job, in my opinion, of recording their own stuff solely. I think it's been proven that a team is always going to win out over just you sometimes sitting in your bedroom. Now, is that always true? Not always. Look at Billie Eilish.
Her and her brother.
Great example of that. So, but that's 1 in a million, in my opinion. So this is just my opinion. I've always thought that, 2 is better than 1. When you build a team around what you're trying to do, if you look at any successful artist, they did not do it by themselves. And so bringing in someone to help take what you've been given, this raw God-given talent that you've been given, and help shape that from a song perspective, from a ministry perspective. Like, those are actually my favorite conversations, is where you're sitting with artists and me sitting here just having deep ministry conversations about how they're trying to figure out their path in ministry, and how that translates to them me trusting me more with their music. Like it's kind of an unexplainable thing, but surround yourself with people who are better than what you do, and it will obviously bring what you do higher. The old adage is the rising tide floats all boats. Like, seriously, I've seen that happen so many times, even in the 5 years that I've moved here. Just being in a relationship with people that are stronger and better than you will automatically make you a stronger and better person, musician, writer, producer, because you're challenged by that. So don't be afraid to build a team and find someone who is the right fit for you as a producer. Just because that person as a producer has 30 number one singles and is on the radio may not be the person for you. You've got to find the right person, because you're linking arms with this person for X number of weeks, if not months, to create music. And if they're not going to capture your vision, if they don't understand what you're going for, then you're going to be very frustrated at that. So do your homework, build a team of people that fit what you're trying to do. As a producer, I would say, just start and just do. Meaning, you could go to school for that, for production if you want, and you'll spend a lot of money, and that's great if you want to do that. But I can't tell you one producer here in town that has been very, very successful at what they do, that I know personally, that actually went to school. They just started doing it. They just literally bought the gear, and they just started doing it. Started putting in 10,000 hours and just doing it. And they've stayed diligent, and they've had a lot of failures, and they've had a lot of disappointments, but they've stayed with it, and they've just done it. And I would say, remember that it's a service industry. So you're serving the artists. You're not trying to build your career on them. You're trying to help serve them to make their career the best it can be. And so if you walk away and you never get an accolade out of it, guess what? Your job is done, because your job is to help make them the best that they can be. So serve the people that you're given, and serve them as well as you can.
Thank you for your advice and your expertise, and just hanging out and getting to spend time with you. And man, I'm excited for people to hear this episode. I love lots of good information, a lot of things that we haven't actually talked about before. Cool. With a lot of guests. So a little more detailed focus on some things. So I'm excited for people to hear it. So
I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man. Fun. I appreciate your friendship, and
absolutely.
And we need to write again soon.
We do.
Right,
we'll do it soon.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
All right, well, there you have it. Chris Clayton is full of wisdom and knowledge when it comes to producing. I love the conversation that we had on the live album versus a studio album, and just kind of how all those things work together, and seeing the differences and similarities, and kind of getting in depth in that. So I know a lot of you guys listening are into production and wanting to do some of those things. So I hope you're able to take what we've talked about here, and that you apply it to what you do in your career. Please let me know how that's going for you. Hit me up on Instagram at John Martin Keith, on my Facebook page that You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry at Facebook, and or you can email me, contact@johnmartinkeith.com. You know how to reach out to me. Let me know what's going on with you. I'd love to hear about it. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Please let your friends know about it. Ask them to subscribe, and continue to get this out all over the place. So grateful for you guys listening and being a part of the show. And remember, Edenbrook Productions is here to help if you need consulting services via phone call, Skype, Zoom, or FaceTime. Let us know how we can help you begin to make a living in the music industry.